Hello, I'm back. I loved reading Cinderella books with you last week. So this week we're going to take a whole new story and read all different versions of the same story, just like we did with Cinderella. If you didn't get to see those videos last week, I can add a link to those so that you can get to the Cinderella stories. So are you ready to find out which story we're reading this week? This is, I'll do some of them. Here's one. Oops, so much glare. Here's another one. Ooh, this one might give it away. Here's another one. One more. And then the last one, that kind of says the whole thing, right? Little Red Riding Hood. So you may have read the story of Little Red Riding Hood, but just in case you haven't, we'll kind of review what the traditional story that we've read sounds like. So the characters are Little Red Riding Hood, right? That's who the story's about, mostly. She's off to visit her grandmother, yes, and as she goes, and her mother sends her to see her grandmother, and as she goes, her mother says, do not stop for anything, don't dilly-dally, go straight there, don't talk to strangers, the whole thing. And as she goes, she meets who? The wolf, yes. So she meets the wolf. He has a plan. He goes to the grandmother's cottage before Little Red gets there. And then when she comes in, grandmother, that's another character. It's not grandmother in the bed. It is the wolf pretending to be the grandmother. And Little Red kind of knows that it's not her. She says, what big eyes you have, and what big teeth you have, and what big ears you have. And in the traditional story, the wolf eats Little Red, I think. And someone comes to save one more character, the woodsman. So he comes in and he gets her and he gets her out of his belly and the story's over. So that's kind of the traditional Little Red story. If you haven't read that one, you can look up on YouTube. You can just look Little Red Riding Hood books, and you can probably find the traditional story read aloud somewhere there. But we're going to start with this one. I'm not going to say it. It's one of my favorites. I always say that. It's one of my favorites. This is the Little Red Cowboy Hat. So you can see we have a cowgirl there, and she's wearing a red cowboy hat, so that's where she got her name from. This is by Susan Lowell, and it's illustrated by Randy Cecil. So Susan Lowell wrote the words, she wrote the story, and the illustrator did what? Yep, he drew the picture. Randy Cecil drew all the pictures. So Little Red Cowboy Hat by Susan Lowell, and I took a peek inside already, and I love the end pages. What kind of a place is that? With cactuses and snakes and big rocks and lots of dirt. That is the desert. You're right. So the setting of this story sounds like it's in the desert. The end pages gave us a little hint to that. So here's our title page, Little Red Cowboy Hat by Susan Lowell, and illustrations by Randy Cecil. And got a little picture there of Little Red. And who else is in that picture? Got a big snake there, huh? So usually on the title page, the picture kind of gives us a hint of who's going to be in the story or maybe what's going to happen. Okay? So here we go. So as we're reading this, I want you to be thinking about the traditional story, the story that we hear most often, and maybe the way that this book is the same, or maybe how it's a little bit different. Okay? Here we go. Once upon a ranch, far away in the wilds of the West. So once upon a ranch, that's the setting, in the wilds of the West. So probably a ranch out in the desert somewhere. There lived a little girl named Red. There lived a little girl with red hair, Her hair was a fine color, somewhere between firecrackers and new pennies. And to top it off, her grandmother gave her a bright red cowboy hat. So everybody called her Little Red Cowboy Hat, or Little Red for short. One day her mother said, "Little Red, your grandmother's sick in bed. Ride over there and take her this loaf of homemade bread and jar of cactus jelly." That sounds good, cactus jelly. "Yes, ma'am," said Little Red, who loved to visit her grandmother. "Don't dilly-dally along the way," warned her mother. "No, ma'am," said Little Red. "And be careful," her mother said. "It's rattlesnake season." "Yes, ma'am." We live where there's rattlesnakes, and it is starting to be rattlesnake season right now. So if you go out hiking or you're out, you have to watch out for rattlesnakes. If you live where there's no rattlesnakes, you're very lucky. Okay, Little Red put on her cowboy hat and saddled her buckskin pony. She packed the loaf of bread and jar of jelly in her saddlebag, and then she set off for her grandmother's ranch several miles away. First, she rode down into a deep canyon. Clink, clunk, crunch went the pony's feet, striking sparks from the rocks. So he's going along, and who's in this picture here? We already see that snake in there, right? And it looks like he's got stars above his head. Why would the illustrator put stars above his head? Clink, clink, cluck, crunch went the pony's feet. So what did he hit? Yeah, I think he hit the rattlesnake too. He's already given that snake some problems. Next, she rode up onto the wide mesa where gold poppies and blue lupines blossomed in the grass. "Grandma loves flowers," thought Little Red. "I'll just stop for a minute." As she was picking wildflowers, she heard her pony give a snort. Can you do a snort like a pony? What do they sound like? That wasn't a very good snort. Let me see if you can do a better one. That was so much better than mine. Nice job. "Whoa, Buck," said Little Red, turning around. "A snake?" she wondered. So the pony has noticed something. Who does he notice? Yeah, it's probably maybe just like the traditional Little Red story. Ooh, they're going to have a conversation. Then she saw the wolf. "Howdy, little girl," he said. He wore a cowboy hat 3 shades blacker than a locomotive. That's pretty dark black, isn't it? "Hi," she said. The wolf stood between her and the pony. She didn't want to talk to him, but she'd been raised to be polite. "What's your name, honey?" he asked. He came closer than she liked. "Little Red Cowboy Hat," she answered. She'd also been raised to tell the truth. "Red?" said the wolf. A creepy feeling ran up her backbone and tingled into the roots of her hair. She knew she was talking to somebody that wasn't very good, right? She had a bad feeling. "Red as in ketchup?" he asked. "Or red as in blood?" She didn't answer. He was much too close. She could count the teeth in his smile. "Where you going, sugar?" he said. "Why not take a little ride with me?" She was warned not to stop. Just then the pony whinnied and reared. What does that mean? He whinnied, so he made a noise, and he reared. So he kind of jumped back onto his back feet. That's what reared means. "Whoa, Buck!" cried Little Red. The wolf leaped away from Buck's hard hooves and Little Red seized the reins and jumped safely onto the saddle. "To Grandma's house!" she shouted as they galloped away. Whew. Thank goodness for the horse. When Little Red reached her grandmother's ranch, she didn't hear a sound except for the windmill creaking. Scream, scream. The chickens didn't even cluck. Usually Grandma was outside, doctoring a cow or mixing cement. But now nothing moved except for 3 buzzards circling high above in the sky. There's the 3 buzzards. Poor Grandma, thought Little Red. She tied Buck to the hitching post and tippy-toed into the ranch. It was quiet as a tree full of owls. Quiet as a tree full of owls. What do owls sound like when they're just in the middle of the day sitting in a tree? Yeah, they're really quiet because they're just sleeping. So, Grandma, she called softly. She saw a big lump in Grandmother's bed. The lacy edge of Grandmother's shower cap peeked out above the patchwork quilt. "I brought you some bread and jelly, Grandma," said Little Red. "Thank you, Honey Bun," said a muffled voice. Thump. What was that noise outside? Little Red stiffened. Something was wrong. "Grandma," she said, "is that you?" "Of course it is, sweetie." "I can't see you," said Little Red suspiciously. The lump moved. Deep down in the bedclothes, a strange dark eye glittered. She's seen his face. Is that Grandma? I don't think so. Shoot, thought Little Red. Grandma must be really sick. "What big eyes you have, Grandma," she said. "The better to see you with, Pumpkin," said the voice. Ka-thump! Came the noise outside again. Something's happening outside. Oh, wow. This is a good picture. Ooh, come over here so you can see it better. The quilt fell away from a huge, hairy muzzle. Now Little Red Cowboy Hat knew perfectly well that this was not her grandmother. But where was Grandma? She decided to string the wolf along until she found out. What does that mean, to string someone along? She's going to string the wolf along until she found out. Yes, it means that she's just going to keep going with his story so she knows that he doesn't know that she knows the truth. So she went on bravely. "What a big nose you have, Grandma. The better to smell you with, Dumpling," said the figure in bed. Thump, thump. "And what sharp teeth you have, Grandma." That noise keeps happening. That thump, thump sound keeps happening. This is a good picture, too. "The better to eat you with, Angel Pie." And the wolf sat upright and grabbed Little Red Cowboy Hat. Thump, thump, thump. "Ow!" she screamed. "Quiet, you delicious morsel," he snarled, licking his chops. He's not pretending to be Grandma anymore. Oh, wow. Here we go. Now we're going to find out what the thump, thump, thump was. "Oh, no, you don't," yelled a familiar voice. "Get your paws off her, you varmint." And there was Little Red Cowboy Hat's grandma with an axe in her hand. She had been chopping wood. The wolf dropped Little Red like a hot potato and made a break for the window. "Are you all right, Red?" called Grandma. "Yes, ma'am," she said. She doesn't look all right in that picture. She looks like she was pretty scared there. Like maybe he had her pretty worried. She was in a predicament. All right. The wolf tripped over his nightgown, and then he got stuck in the window. His tail waved helplessly behind him. Meanwhile, Grandma snatched her shotgun from the mantel. live on a ranch. Gotta have a shotgun. Yes. Pow! Take that, you low-life lobo, she shouted. Come on, Red. What is a lobo? Do you know what a lobo is? That's the word in Spanish for a wolf. So, a lobo. Little Red leaped in onto Buck and twirled her lasso. Together they chased the wolf down the road. Tut, 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 cried the chickens. No, no, called the cattle. Breaking into my house, puffed Grandma, wearing my clothes, getting fleas in my bed, messing with my granddaughter. You would look mighty good as a rug, Mr. Wolf. Grandma's what I would call one tough cookie. She's taking care of business. She didn't need anybody to come save her, did she? Here they are. They're enjoying their sandwiches, it looks like, sitting on a fence post. Later, back at the ranch, Little Red Cowboy Hat and her grandma sat down to eat their bread and cactus jelly. Now, Red, have you learned your lesson? Asked Grandma. Yep, a girl's got to stick up for herself, said Little Red. Her wind-blown hair glowed in the light of the setting sun. It was a fine color, somewhere between autumn leaves and chili peppers. And Grandma smiled as she smoothed it down. That yellow-bellied, snake-blooded, skunk-eyed, rancid son of a parallelogram. Whew, she's got some pretty sharp words for him there. This time, he picked the wrong grandma, and they never had any wolf trouble around her ranch ever again. The end. There's the rest of the end pages. Are there any changes to the end pages? Lots of snakes out there in the desert. A little desert tortoise, maybe. All right. So, how was Little Red Cowboy Hat like the original Little Red story? Yep, there was a Little Red Riding Hood, and she went to see her grandma. That's the same. There was a wolf, and her mother. So we have those four characters are the same. There wasn't a woodcutter, was there? No, they didn't need a woodcutter to come save them, because who saved them in the end? Yeah, the grandmother came and saved them in the end, so she knew exactly what to do to get rid of that wolf. So that is our first story for Little Red Cowboy Hat. And tomorrow, should I choose right now what we're going to read tomorrow? I think tomorrow we will read Lone Popo. This is a Little Red Riding story from China. So we're going to read this one. This is from a different place around the world. So come back tomorrow and watch us read that, or read that story with me, actually. Okay? Thank you. Bye-bye.